welcome to the first episode of the Straight Wrestling Voices of the Indies podcast. At first, a small introduction for our new listeners. Straight Wrestling is one of the longest running German podcasts. In fact, we are doing this now for 14 years. And after 14 years, we decided let's try something new. And we created this new side project. On our German main podcast, we review wrestling shows mostly. But in this podcast, we obviously switch from German to English. And we want to talk with people from the US independent scenes because we at Straight Wrestling are huge US independent wrestling fans. I'm your host, Morbo, and with me is, without a shadow of doubt, the biggest German US independent fan in the world, in Germany, Sebastian.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Morbo, and thank you to everyone who's listening. But of course, the biggest thank you goes out to our guest of our first episode today. He is the CEO of Action Wrestling. He's a matchmaker of the Scenic City Invitational. He's, in my opinion, not only one of the most influential people for independent wrestling in the southeast of the United States, but also for independent wrestling in the United States in general. Welcome, Matt Griffin, and thank you very much for taking the time to be our guest at our first episode.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and I appreciate that stellar introduction. I hope that I can live up to it, and just thank you for being such an avid supporter and advocate for what we're doing here in the U.S.
Yeah, let's first introduce yourself to the listeners who don't know who you are.
Yeah, well, my name is Matt Griffin. About 5 years ago, I opened up Action Wrestling, which is based just outside of Atlanta, Georgia, in the United States. I have a background. I started wrestling training in 1998. My first match was in 1999. I wrestled under the name JC North. I did some of the notable independents that were around at the time. The landscape has changed quite a bit. And then I kind of went into not really retirement. I just stopped wrestling for several years. And you might not know this, Sebastian, but it was actually the Scenic City Invitational that brought me back to independent wrestling. I was asked for the first one in 2015 if I would help out with some of the production because I do have some TV and film background. So I understand cameras, angles, filming, and of course, as a wrestler, I understand what wrestling looks like and is supposed to look like. And I did that. Had a really good time for a couple of years, and I just decided, I think I should try to run something myself. And so Action Wrestling had its first show April 2018. And I haven't looked back. A few months later, I officially joined SCI with promoter Scott Hensley. I call myself the matchmaker because I feel like Scott's the local promoter. He's the one hanging the posters. And, I help out a lot with what can be done online. There can be a lot of booking wrestlers, booking flights, handling tickets that can be done online remotely. So I try to do a lot of that to make up for the fact that Scott does a lot of does it on the ground in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And it's been a fun time. We've had a lot of good Scenic City Invitationals. We've had a lot of good satellite events like our Scenic City Rumble. Action Wrestling I've just been so fortunate to have a good home base here, and we've been able to do shows on the road that have been well received, and it's just been a great ride. And as I can only attribute my success to the fact that we get a lot of great wrestlers who make us look good. I would not be considered a good promoter if it wasn't the wrestlers going out there and having entertaining shows. So I do appreciate everything. I know Scott would as well. I know everybody in our circle would, but it's all about the wrestlers who go out there. They're the ones taking the bumps and, making sure that our shows come off well and are just well received and are fun to watch.
Can you tell us more about what fascinates you about wrestling as a promoter, but also as a fan, and maybe what is important for you in wrestling?
Wow, I used to think about it when I was a kid. When I started watching, it's like I don't know what it is about wrestling. I just love it, and I assume it's just if you it's athleticism and sport mixed with drama. And in wrestling, when you put on a show, you only get one shot at it. It's going to be live in front of the cameras, and the people are going to see it. So there's a high potential for disaster anytime you're doing something in wrestling. It has to go right. The wording in a promo has to go right if it's something that's going to kick off a big angle. You want to build the drama in a particular wrestling match so that people react the way you want them to at the end. Sometimes they'll be happy, and sometimes they'll be pissed. And sometimes I've even booked matches that we've had that have left people feeling that's not what I wanted. And it's like, that's good because the payoff is going to come later. So I think it's all those elements that I get to, as a booker, I get to create. And when I was wrestling, it was being able to be the one executing those things and having the audience. I mean, it's a cool feeling when people pay money to see you wrestle, and you're there and you have the spotlight on you. It's definitely flattering, and you have that control where you can control people's emotions, and you can have significant events in wrestling. I mean, action wrestling didn't exist before April 2018, our first show, and we built it up to something where people are anticipating future events, and they want to see matches, and they want to see wrestlers, and they get really invested. And that's pretty neat because it came out of literally nothing. There was no other show in the area that I took over. Scenic City, we start back at the drawing board often because we have to have so many wrestlers, and we don't run but a couple times a year with events. So we're constantly in the, how can we tell a story through a couple shows mode. So I think all those elements just really fascinate me.
And maybe before I go further to action wrestling, I have a very specific question for you as a promoter, because it's a question I always like to ask promoters is, what is your opinion on kids getting positive reactions, getting cheered on? Because I ask these questions to promoters because today I think maybe not in indie wrestling, but more mainstream wrestling, it's getting harder and harder to establish a heel character. It seems like heel characters. Oh, sorry.
Did you mean establish a heel character?
I mean, today it seems like you have to be really mean as a heel character to be accepted as a heel character and getting booed.
Yeah, it can be tough because you've watched action wrestling, so you've seen it. With our first champion AC Mack, he was a heel and he was intended to stay as a heel, and then I think of it as that Ric Flair effect where you have the Four Horsemen eventually got cheered because they were just so cool. Ric Flair was just so good and so cool as a heel that when you have heels that are like that, people want to cheer him. So that becomes tough. AC Mack, I told him, it's like, all right, we're going to turn you babyface, but all that really means is you're going to cheat less, not never cheat, because of course you're still going to do things. I want you to keep the same character. I just want the fans are going to like you now. And because they already were cheering him for several shows before we actually turned him babyface. I'm like, I told him, I want you to stay that way. And, fans really bought into him. And it's like, all right, you're just going to wrestle the heels now. It just opens up a new dimension. Same thing happened with Adam Priest. We never really turned Adam Priest just as people started really cheering for him. And they liked his, he's very snarky. He's very, very much a wise guy and in control in the ring. And people liked that and started reacting to him. It can be really tough though with heels because people, if they become cool, people want to cheer them. And, it can be very hard to just stay that way. And it can be frustrating too, because I want heels to stay heels.
Yeah, I think maybe I'm a little bit old school now. It's just fun to boo the heels and cheer for the faces. But I mean, in the end, if you buy a ticket, you can do basically what you want, I guess.
That's why I appreciate somebody like Shug D. He's been able to be a heel and stay a heel. And, people are always going to be contrarian and cheer for who they want. Or, it's like, oh, I know you want me, I know I'm supposed to boo them, but I want to cheer them. It's like, well, okay. And it's just going to happen. It's just gonna happen. So I try to roll with it as best I can.
Okay, Sebastian.
So now hearing about your opinions on wrestling and also what brought you into wrestling. You already mentioned that you founded Action Wrestling in 2018, 5 years ago now. And what would you say? What made you found Action Wrestling? What made you start Action Wrestling in 2018? And also, what were your goals for the promotion or even for the first show that you did?
Well, when I had been thinking for some time about, and I mean years, about running shows. I'd always thought I could do it. I really had always thought that it's something that could be possible. And I was never going to do it, though, without it being the absolute right conditions. Like, I'm not going to do it out of desperation. I'm not going to force it. And eventually I found my hometown's rec center, and I started walking through it, and I was able to meet with the rec manager. We hit it off pretty quickly. And, and that was it. I basically committed myself to doing 2 shows. I was going to do 1 show to see how the first would go, and then I would do another one to try to follow up on it. And I did that 2 months later, and that was what I had mentally committed to, and just to see if this would work. And thankfully, we sold enough tickets to the first show that I was like, all right, I'm just going to go ahead and do this. Throughout. I booked all the calendar throughout December, so for some more dates. And in Tyrone, they also had a wrestling event that was not very good, unfortunately. That was run at a town fair, and I took that over. And so we have, as part of one of our town events every year, we have free outdoor wrestling, which is great. And I live in the town that I base my shows in. I live in Tyrone, Georgia, and I work here as well. So I'm constantly in the community and in the neighborhood, and people know me as the Action Wrestling guy. I get fans sometimes who come up to me and hey, when's the next show? My goal was, I gave a lot of money the first few years away to nonprofits. I really like to do that, to give back, to volunteer. I do that a lot. I also wanted to just give a really good impression of wrestling in my community, because there are lots of shows that are, just a hot mess. They're not run correctly. People aren't honest, and they don't get paid. I just wanted to do something that was going to be. I just wanted to do something that was going to be respected. I wanted to do something where it's like people think wrestling is high class entertainment. I don't know if that makes sense, but I just got told not that long ago that I was possibly not going to be able to do a show in a certain building because they thought it was redneck, and it's like, well, that doesn't make any sense, because we're not. I mean, the way I promote Action Wrestling and the reason I like the name is it's like a live action superhero movie. Iron Man and Captain America, you can watch them on the screen in the theater, but they're not going to come out and say hello to you after the movie. Wrestlers will. And over the years, we've also booked, many wrestlers who've been on TV or gone on to have gone on to be on TV and had contracts, and that's I just think that speaks highly to the type of talent that we like and that we book on our shows.
You already mentioned how important fundraising is for the identity of action wrestling from the start. And you also already said what you want to represent. And what would you say? Is there a certain philosophy behind it? And is there also something you want to present, not only in terms of what do you want to stand for, as you just mentioned, but also what do you want to present to your fans, to the wrestling fans you want to reach?
I mean, as far as philosophies, I do like to run stories, but I don't like to run, I don't think every match needs an angle or an event. I mean, I have lots of fans who come to a show, might check out for a couple shows, come back. I want things to be easily digestible. Like, I don't want to have, lots of TV wrestling. Sometimes the stories and the matches, they might get a little complicated, and I don't like that. I want people to, it's like, all right, that's a face, that's a heel. And I do well with babyface versus babyface matches, and I do well because we try to present wrestling as much as I can in like a sports context. So I've had a lot of face versus face as just competitive matches. I've even been told it's like, that they think there's a lot of sportsmanship in the way I present wrestling, and I was like, that's wild, because that's not something I ever would have thought. But I've just gotten lucky with the way we've done some babyface versus babyface matches, where it's like you get a 50-50 and people are cheering for each. So philosophy wise, I try to keep it simple. So it's not like, well, if you haven't been here in 6 months, you're just going to be totally lost. And I don't believe, for me, this is for me. Obviously, if I was running TV wrestling, you're trying to peak to pay-per-views, that's different. But for me, I don't usually promote like big shows where it's like a quarterly show or once a year show. It's like, this is the one you have to be at. I want people to want to be at every show. So I don't really peak to my giant shows, because then I don't want any of them to seem skippable. And I think that's really it philosophy wise. I'm also willing to change if there's been times in the past where I didn't necessarily have plans for a wrestler, but they got a huge reaction, and it's like, well, they're going to be back, and I try to figure out something that I can do. I'm definitely willing to change for what the audience is telling me, whether they like someone a lot or maybe if they don't like somebody.
Following your philosophy you've just described, would you say that there's like a target audience for action, or a certain group of fans you would like to reach? And also tying in what with what you just said, that you can also change like your perspective. Did this maybe even change over time, that there was a certain target audience in the beginning in 2018, 5 years ago, and now the target audience has changed, or there were more target groups that you would like to address now?
I think my target audience is anyone who wants to see a good show. I try to keep it, and when we've had times where wrestlers get a little too into it, there are middle fingers and there are some swearing, but I try to keep it where people would be okay with bringing their kids. And when I describe the show, I'm like, well, if you're okay with pro wrestling violence, that's what it is. I would like to, online, I do like to have people, I'm going to admit it, I do like to have people who, review matches, and write about them on their blogs or websites. I like to have them watch the shows because they're telling other people, when fans are writing about it and talking about it, it just helps broaden my audience. I like the fact that we get results and rankings from published in Pro Wrestling Illustrated. I like the fact that we have a lot of our wrestlers ranked in the PWI 500. So I am trying to reach that kind of secondary audience. Obviously, the first audience is in the event. In the event itself, people watching who paid their tickets. The secondary audience is people who are watching it live or on VOD on IWTV. And I definitely want to have matches that are talked about and people seek out, because that just helps broaden our fan base. It gets us more, the more followers you have, the more people you have to advertise to, which is the more people you have the potential of selling T-shirts to. People will travel up to watch shows. They'll come in from surrounding areas. We had our big Southeast First show a year and a half ago, and we had a lot of people come from outside of Georgia for that, because we were marketing it as a Southeast show, and there was a lot of interest. So we try to keep it, accessible for everybody. I think it can be a really tough balance, but that's what I go for.
You just described the different kinds of audiences that you have. Regarding this, would you describe action wrestling as, like, especially given the family-friendly aspect you just mentioned, would you describe action wrestling as like a typical local independent promotion, or, like, I will put it in quotation marks, you can't see, Dream Match Factory, or like a storytelling-based promotion, or, and it sounds to me like this, like a hybrid of everything and like a mixture of everything?
I think it's a hybrid of everything. It's also gonna greatly depend on where you are. I mean, I'm in a town that people raise a lot of families, and I'm not in a city where I have tons of, it's definitely a different audience than a lot of shows would have, like if you were in a city. I mean, I want to make it. If you like great wrestling and if you like the work rate matches, you're going to be happy. If you like the dynamic personalities and guys who can do flippy stuff out of the ring and then go see him at the table. I mean, my son is 8 years old. He still loves the fact that he can go see wrestlers at the merch table. He buys promo pictures, and I like for him to support wrestlers, but it's like, sometimes he's around the building early. It's like you see these guys every month, and I love the fact that it's just so interactive. I mean, if you yell at the movie screen, they ain't changing anything. But if you will yell at Liam Gray or Adrian Alanis, the Skulk, when they're coming around the ring making their entrance, they will stop and react to you and yell back at you. Eric Royal will stop in his tracks and put his finger in your face. So I like the fact that these type of things appeal to everybody, because if you go to a local sports event, like a high school event, you're not really supposed to boo the other team. The only wrong answer, in my opinion, at action wrestling is pure silence. I love to have people cheer. I love to have people boo. I love to have crowd interaction. Just taking no sides and not rooting for anybody that's the worst. You don't want apathy at wrestling shows. So those are kind of the things, the way that I try to push and present it. And it can be a challenge. It's been 5.5 years in the same building, so I'm always, and some wrestlers move on, some retire, some get signed. So, it's always a challenge. So I try to keep my eye on, all right, who's local that I could bring in that I think people would react to? Because you're doing a lot of guesswork too. Like, it was not a difficult guess that people would like and react to AC Mack. That's why on my very first show, he was in the first match. And even before the first match, I'm like, I want to put the microphone in his hand. Because I told him, I don't know how the crowd's going to be, but if you talk at them, I think people will react to you, and it will encourage people to react during your match. Because, if you're going ahead and just running your mouth and are encouraging yourself to be hated, I think that'll engender some crowd reactions, and it did. So I've been wrong plenty of times. There's wrestlers I thought might get better reactions, and sometimes it's just audience based. You don't know how your particular audience is going to take to somebody who might be popular elsewhere. And by the same reaction, there's people who are super popular in my building who don't wrestle outside the state of Georgia. And either is fine. I mean, it's whatever is going to get people to watch on IWTV and to buy tickets to live events, or talk about us on Twitter, buy a T-shirt. All of it matters. All of it matters. And I try to keep it the family-friendly promotion, but I like, the most anti-family friendly promotion out there is probably ICW No Holds Barred. I absolutely love ICW. I think Danny and his team doing a great job. I love the product. That's just not something I can present. But I love to watch it, and I've let my kid occasionally watch it with me on IWTV. It's just, I have to be I have a particular product I can do, and I've always joked about doing deathmatch shows with a more adult, older audience, but I don't know how that would go, and I try to be very conservative in everything that I do. I want to make a success. That's something like deathmatch wrestling is not my specialty, so I haven't really delved into that yet, and that's, to me, kind of mentally the next challenge I want to take on. I'd really love to be able to do something in that regard, and maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. If I do it, it's going to be something where I really want to be set up for success.
You said that everything is important for you that reaches people on IWTV or makes them buy a shirt. And in this context, what would you say? How important was the Southeast First storyline, especially with AC Mac winning the title, but also with Uncharted Territory moving to the TW Arena, not only for action wrestling, but for the Southeast wrestling scene in general? How much did it change, and can you still feel the changes that came along with this storyline?
I think it was definitely a big thing. I had wanted a type of show since like 2018 or 2019. There was forget who promoted it. It was a Midwest mixtape type of event with several promotions, and I just really liked it. And I would talk with IWTV, hey, I'd like to really try to run this type of show. Then when the pandemic happened, priorities shifted into just making sure that we'd be able to run shows again. When it became appropriate again to start talking about it, we did. And with storytelling, Southeast First really began at the 2021 SCI, which was 5 months earlier, because AC Mac, as you'll recall, he won SCI, and he gets on the microphone and delivers a blistering promo. And that was to set the stage for, even though it was in Tennessee, not in Atlanta, there were action fans who were there. And with AC Mac bringing that same style, like talking about wanting the shot at the big belt, the IWTV world title, that let people wanted to see it. So by the time we actually gave it to them, we had made them want to see it, and they were happy when we said, I still remember it. I'm in the ring December 2021. It's like, all right, our show in January, we've been talking about it, but it's not going to be an action show. It's going to be an IWTV super show. And people, like, once they understood that, popped. And I said the main event is going to be AC challenging the champion for us. So that was like all the work we had done. And I give full credit to Jerry and Dylan Hales with IWTV for paving the way and allowing us to do that. That set the stage really well for our Southeast First, which, it allowed us to work and promote other promotions and other brands, which I think is good. I like to work together. And, I think Uncharted Territory was a big deal down here. I think it helped with Action and other brands who really bought in. I think it helped elevate our status. I mean, Uncharted Territory was live every Monday for 13 weeks and led right into the 2022 SCI, because that was the weekend after the last Uncharted Territory. So as we were just trying to get along and make it as cohesive a universe as possible with our, Action, SCI, TWE, Southern Underground Pro. Hopefully they'll be able to run again. We can't always have our wrestlers with the same characters, but we try to have a lot of things aligned in business philosophy. And, I think what's good for us in the Southeast can benefit us all, because the power center for independent wrestling in the U.S. has always been the Northeast, and the fact that more Southeast promotions are getting out there and being seen. And like I was at Wrestling Open last week, and I have wrestlers who came up and they knew me. They recognized me from my Twitter profile picture, or they had heard of me. Somebody mentioned, it's like, oh, the Action guys here. It's like, okay, that's really cool, and they want to come down here. And so I think that's the type of thing that helps the scene overall. So yeah, I think Southeast First, uncharted territory was a very big deal. I'm just so glad IWTV invested that time into the Southeast.
There's a key sentence you just said, because you said you like to work with others. You mentioned TWE, of course, promotion of Jay Newman. You mentioned the ICW Noel Spot, promotion from Danny DeManto. Would you say regarding this that partnership and collaborations and working together is important in today's wrestling landscape, especially with things like IWTV? You mentioned Dylan Heads. And also I would like to know, is there a chance that we will see Action collaboration shows either in your area or somewhere else in the near or not so distant future?
As far as collaboration shows, I don't like to give spoilers. I always have my mind open and throwing out ideas. I'm very conservative with ideas. Like, for every idea that we've had that was like a Southeast First, and it just happened. It just worked out great that they decided to put uncharted territory down here. I wanted to do a Southeast First collaboration event for years, and the timing worked out perfectly with IWTV. But I've had, for every 4, 5, 6 ideas I have, I discard most of them and sometimes only go with one, because I'm constantly thinking of ideas. And I think the reason I'm successful is because a lot of shows, they are almost desperate to run, and they will go ahead and promote shows that don't have a huge chance for success, whether it's their payroll is too high or they don't promote well, for whatever reason. I try to do everything I try to do. I want to link up to be successful, to have a really good chance for success. And I forget the first part of the question you asked. I apologize. I don't know that I answered it at all.
I think you answered it. And I have one final question before Morbo will take a look at the next Action Wrestling show with you. You already talked about partnerships and working together, and especially interesting for our German listeners. The Action Wrestling Championship was also defended this year at the 16 Karat Go weekend as part of WXW Now and Friends Showcase. And in this context, I would like to ask, is it also a goal for you to reach fans in international areas? And can you imagine, maybe following up to what you just said, that this can be repeated, so that you maybe will have championship matches again in Europe or even shows?
I would love to be able to have more matches, more title matches. It's funny because we had a show that same weekend, and we that Adam Priest and Jade Newman were touring, and it was that was obviously our focus here. We were still pushing what was happening with WXW. But there were a lot of people who knew what was going on at WXW. So the next time Scott Hensley, our ring announcer, and my partner in SCI, he announces Adam Priest as the Action Champion, we had some fans who were like, world. It's like, all right. screw it. It's the Action World Championship. And it wasn't me saying it, it was the fans saying it. So it's like, okay, it was very rewarding to see that a lot of local fans who may not follow anything besides action, because we have fans who are very knowledgeable about what's going on in the wrestling Twitter world. They're following everything. And then we have some fans who come to shows when we have them just for the live events. And, both are valid. I care as much about somebody who might buy a ticket once or twice a year to come to a show as those who have come every show for 5 years. I hope to have, more matches overseas and more collaborations, and, as long as it can benefit everybody, I'm absolutely interested in doing that. I appreciate everything that WXW, has I talked with Felix over there, and we have a really good relationship, I think. I appreciate everybody who's given us, a chance to get our name out there, and by the same token, I've talked with other promotions, and I try to push, some of their people where appropriate. And, if or there's a lot of cooperation that happens behind the scenes that people don't know about, just making contacts and helping out, making referrals. People don't understand that a lot of wrestling promoters talk to each other. So if something happens in one place, several other promoters are going to know about it before, the weekend's over. So collaboration is just so, it's just so important to me, because, there's plenty of shows out there, and it's absolutely valid if you do. They don't tape their shows, they sell tickets and make money, but they don't do anything with them outside of it. And to me, I want to run my shows that matter. I want to have shows that people are talking about in other areas. So, internationally, I would love to figure out how to get more people watching on IWTV like you did.
Yeah, let's talk about Into the Actionverse, the next action wrestling show. And one match that sticks out immediately for us German wrestling fans is Ava Everett versus Devil Macabre, because Ava Everett is the former WXW World Women's Champion, WXW the biggest promotion in Germany, and Devil Macabre is the current German Wrestling Federation Women's Champion, easily the second biggest promotion in Germany. So what are your thoughts on this match, and do you think it symbolized the approach of action wrestling cooperating with other promotions?
Yeah, it was initially supposed to be a WXW title match. Ava Everett lost it a month ago to Delmi Exo. And I appreciate that WXW was interested in having their championship defended in other promotions. That's a very cool thing to me. I think that's a neat match. I mean, there was a promo that was a really good video that Devil Macabre cut when she was in touring Germany, and she really wanted to get her hands on Ava and become champion, which was a fiery promo, and I know it made people interested in seeing the match. And now there's no title involved, but to me that almost makes it more interesting, because we're talking about bragging rights, and Devlin's already stated that she's going to be going back over to Europe in the fall. So I'm anxious to see how that comes out and what happens from there.
Yeah, other matches announced so far: Adam Priest versus Billy Starks, fantastic match, and Goten versus the Squatting Dragons. Any thoughts on these matches?
Yeah, Adam Priest is he's a fighting champion. He's our first two-time action wrestling champion. Lost it to Anthony Henry and then regained it. I think Billy Starks is just an absolutely incredible wrestler. She is only quote unquote 18, but she's a 5-year veteran in the business. And she's got more knowledge and experience, and she's probably more traveled than about 98 or 99% of independent wrestling people out there. She might be the most traveled independent wrestler, and considering the fact that she did most of that when she was actively in high school, that's just amazing. And she's had several wins, and I think she deserves a title shot. the good hand, they made their feelings well known that they were coming for everything. So the Kevin Ryan and Shug D are going to start. They're going to start teaming more regularly, and the Squatting Dragons, they became a team, and they teamed up actually with Cruel in a 6-man match, and they proved themselves. They won a 6-man, so they're going to, they're going to go ahead, and they're motivated to make it down here as well. And I have plenty more that I would like to. I found that it's nicer to announce matches closer to the show because sometimes you do have some changes, and I hate having to make, to go back, and it's easier if you've just never announced it in the first place, and it's easier to make a change. And plus, I think a little bit later towards the show gives people less time to anticipate, which makes it, if you've heard about a match and you know about the card 2 months before, you're thinking about it. It's not like I have TV to build up angles every week, like a weekly television show. So I think it's like, ooh, we get to see this match in a couple days, so I think the late announcements have been working well for us. But I think it's going to be, I'm always trying to do banger shows. I think the most important thing is how good the wrestlers in the ring are. I want to present the best wrestling in the ring in the state of Georgia and in the Southeast, period. And I feel like, if we aren't the best in-ring promotion, we're pretty dang close.
So going further, what is next for Action? What are the goals for the future or not so near future?
Without spoiling anything, just to keep expanding. I've had some good conversations lately about running more shows. I'd like to have events in different venues. I have no plans to leave my current main venue, but I've had conversations with schools and another venue about opening up, and I would like to just have more events and be able to broaden our base throughout Georgia. I think that's the biggest thing. I would also like to be able to have kind of a super show in conjunction with other weekends. And I would like to be able to, I'd love to be able to do something internationally. It all depends as long as it makes business sense to do it. That's the biggest key. As long as it makes business sense to do it, then I'm interested.
Okay, Sebastian.
Yes. Are there any more questions from you, Morbo, or?
No, I think it's time for Matt to plug everything he wants, promotes everything he wants.
Exactly.
Oh, promote? Would you say promote everything?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to. We're on pretty much all the social medias. If you want to sample Action Wrestling, the best thing you can actually do is go to youtube.com/Action Wrestling. We have a lot of our classic matches from the last 5 years up for free on YouTube. On IWTV, if you're not a member of IWTV.live, it's essentially the Netflix of independent wrestling. If you join with the code ACTION, ACTION, that helps us out. And you can watch all of our shows in full on there. You can type in Action Wrestling 1, Action Wrestling, and the number 1 on Facebook or Instagram. We're on Twitter at Wrestle, WRESTLE, Action, and then the number 1. And you can find me personally on Twitter at Matt the Mouth. And I think that's about it. We have our August 11th show, which is going to be live on IWTV. That's Into The Actionverse. I've gotten keeping in theme with the superheroes. We've themed this one after the most recent Spider-Man movie. And we have the Scenic City Invitational, which happened a couple weeks ago in Chattanooga. That's up on the Scenic City channel on IWTV both nights. You can also watch the night before on TWE on IWTV. Action Futures Showcase, where Rachel Armstrong had a really big coming out party. That's on the Action channel as well. So you can also buy our merchandise at shopiwtv.com. And oh boy, do I just have so many things to plug, don't I? Yeah, I appreciate everything, guys, and thank you for letting me talk for a little bit and being one of your first guests.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming to the show. I just want to say, if you live in the area, go to check out Action Wrestling, and if you can't be there live, go to IWTV, and I guarantee you will fall in love immediately with the promotion like I did.
And I just wanted to say thank you to you again, Matt. Thank you for being the first guest of our podcast. And last but not least, I also want to say that, as you mentioned, Matt, that the Scenic City Invitational took place not that long ago. And I was there. I was at all the shows you just mentioned. And wanted to say thank you again for making me feel welcomed at the TWE arena and for helping me also. I wouldn't have made the trip without you, to be honest. And also to everyone, to Jane Newman, to everyone at the TWE arena, to all the wonderful fans, all the wonderful wrestlers I talked to. And these days really made me realize how much I love independent wrestling. And this is also a reason why why Morbo, why Florian, why we all do this podcast, because we want to give something back to independent wrestling. We want independent wrestling to get recognized by more people, and we also want to show there are a lot of alternatives in wrestling today, and they are all worth to give them a shot. So watch IWTV, get IWTV, watch promotions like Action Wrestling, and see how great independent wrestling is. And thank you to everyone, and also thank you to everyone listening. And I hope you will listen to us again.